Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax. Let me tell you a story. Tonight's telling is not of one story, but several. Old Bardic threads gather together, the way fires are banked for the night. The stories are meant to wash over you, to give your mind something beautiful to rest against. This is a compilation for listening, for resting, for remembering how it feels to be held by voice. Let's get into it. The Skykeeper of Viralized Summit, where altitude thinned the breath but thickened the knowing, and one girl held up the sky, not to stop it from falling, but to remind it of who it was. Let's get into it. It was not on any map, though maps have tried to mark it. A jagged rise of crystalline quartz and blue stone high above the snow line, where birds changed direction and even clouds bent their course. Viralized Summit was sacred before memory, the kind of sacred that made compasses spin and bells ring at the wrong time. It called to those who had forgotten how to breathe deeply, because only there breath became truth. Every few generations, someone was born with lungs wide enough to speak the sky's dialect, and every time the summit called them home. She was born in a mountain shelter after her mother's caravan was caught in an avalanche. They were trapped 3 days. When they were found, only the child was alive. There was no frostbite, no signs of trauma, only her eyes, wide, silver-flecked, and unblinking. The rescue team swore she breathed mist in reverse, pulling vapor into her and exhaling clarity. She was raised in lowlands, but always looked up. At night she would sleep on rooftops. During storms she would open her mouth and whisper back at thunder, like it was an argument she meant to win. She did not belong in the flatlands. At 15, she left with only a pack, a carved flute, and a threadbare quilt. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, only that something above the tree line was calling her name correctly. The climb nearly killed her. Ice cracked underfoot, breath stung. 3 days into the ascent, she hallucinated a girl made of mist who said, "When you speak, the sky listens. What will you say?" Her answer was one word: remember. That night, lightning split the sky, and not a drop of rain touched her. At the summit, she found an altar made of cloudstone, engraved with wind glyphs. It wasn't a temple. It was an instrument, and her voice was the final piece. She began to play. She built a shelter from fallen prayer flags and glacier-smooth stone. She boiled snow for tea and grew herbs in ice-sunk planters she carved with fire-heated rock. But mostly, she listened to the way the stars blinked between blizzards, the timing of eagle flights, the tones hidden in thunder. She learned to hear weather memory, what storms still carried from centuries ago, and what skies needed healing from. Pilgrims came to her not for prophecy, but to learn how to speak sky again. She taught through silence, gesture, shared breath. Each morning she played her flute into the horizon, not music, but invocation. Wind always answered. One season, the sky cracked, not literally, but something changed. Sunrises began pulsing, auroras came during noon, and birds circled without migrating. She knew the sky thread was slipping. She climbed to the peak's highest crest, and for 3 days she chanted the breath of every wind she'd catalogued: east fire wind, north frost wind, down spiral, and echo draft. She offered her name, her breath, and the flute's last note. The sky reknit itself around her. When she stepped down, her hair was white, her eyes cloud blue. She never played again, She didn't need to. Her shelter became a quiet sanctuary for wind watchers. The flute remains embedded in the altar. Sometimes it hums in storms. On certain nights, when the wind shifts in threes, you may feel breath caught in your lungs. And when released, feel a peace you forgot you needed. They say that's her, reminding the sky how to listen and you how to exhale. The flame-guarded mountain, where flame-guarded memory and a lone sentinel kindled the light that kept an entire world from forgetting itself. Let's get into it. High above the lowlands, where snow-kissed stone and stars rested nearer than clouds, there stood a solitary peak known as Halvern's Watch. It was not the tallest mountain, but it was the most feared. It never extinguished its fire. The mountain itself was not silent, no, it hummed. Beneath the crust of ancient ice and scorched obsidian stone, molten veins pulsed like sleeping serpents. The cliff faces bore runes older than script, etched by fingers no longer remembered. At twilight, the shadows on its crags sometimes moved counter to the sun. Legend said Halvern had once been a titan who gave up motion so that the world might rest safely at night. At its peak was the Ember Chamber, a stone dome grown rather than built, formed from lava that cooled into the shape of a perfect spiral. Inside it burned a single coal-red ember, the size of a child's fist, but bright enough to cast light down to the foothills. This flame never dimmed, and yet no smoke ever rose. She was born during a silent solstice, the first recorded in memory. No animals cried, no wind moved, no child laughed, even bells would not ring. She was left as a swaddled bundle at the base of Halvern's climb, her name pinned to her in scorched thread. Eleonora. The monks of the lower temple raised her, but soon realized she did not thrive in crowded walls. She could not bear stillness without flame, nor company without wind. At age 9, she climbed the entire mountain alone. She returned 4 days later, her hands scorched, but cradling a coal that pulsed with breath. From that moment on, the mountain acknowledged her. The ember at Halvern's summit was no ordinary flame. It was a living consciousness, a coiled memory of every moment in time, burning so that forgetting could not spread. Eleonora became its keeper, not because she wished it, but because she could hear it. Each night, she sat in the ember chamber, where walls pulsed like a heart and heat danced with shape. The flame whispered names that had vanished from all books, faces of those erased by war or cruelty, forgotten inventions, lullabies, languages. She wrote them all in ash script on slabs of dark stone, then fed those stones back to the flame so the ember could remember for her. Few dared the climb, but sometimes they came, those broken by grief or hollowed by loss. They arrived breathless, frostbitten, desperate, and she listened. She would kneel beside them, gather a pinch of flame, which did not burn unless uninvited, and offer it to their palms. The ember whispered their truth, the child they lost in a winter river, the name of a father they never knew, a song they once knew by heart, now vanished. And it lit a spark of remembrance inside of them, not always comfort, but always truth. One year, a terrible storm rose from the north, but it wasn't wind, it was forgetfulness, sentient and cruel. It had no body, only snow and silence. It consumed libraries and grave sites. It erased stories from minds before they could be passed. It came for Halvern's flame. Eleonora stood at its peak as it approached, her arms bare, her feet unshod. She opened the ember chamber fully for the first time in 100 years, and she stepped into the flame, not to die, but to become memory itself. She rose, glowing with light no eye could hold, and sang the name of the first story ever spoken. The storm broke. The world breathed again. She remained on the mountain, but she was no longer fully human. Her hair flowed like flame thread. Her breath shimmered in sparks. She no longer aged, but she did grow wiser. She built fire rings for other memory keepers across the world and sent coals to be kindled into secret hollows. The memory of the world now has many tenders, but Eleonora, she remained the first, the brightest, the one who stood unshaken when the dark tried to make us all forget. The Life Binder's Garden. There are lives born from soil, not from stars. This was one. Let's get into it. Her name was Ilia. Born in a forgotten valley ringed by willow trees, Ilia entered the world with petals in her mouth. The midwife swore the baby cooed like hummingbird wings. She was the 7th daughter of a family of herbalists. Her mother wove stories into roots of the plants they grew, and her father could hear the thirst of saplings just by touching their bark. From infancy, Ilia thrived in rhythm with the garden. She napped on moss, was bathed in rainwater, and fed roots with broths and honey milk. Each day began with soil touching, a ritual where children dipped their fingers into loam and whispered to the seeds below. By age 4, Ilia could name every medicinal leaf by scent alone. By age 7, she was singing to seeds and watching them sprout by morning. By adolescence, she could coax withered branches into bloom with a single breath, held in compassion. The valley believed she was a life binder, a soul thread who had once been soil and returned in skin to heal it. Villagers brought sick trees and barren soil to her. She never charged coin. Her only request? Tell me the memory this plant holds. They would sit together, ailing olive trees, wilted lilies, dry fields. She would place one hand in the soil and one on the chest of the visitor and listen. She heard stories in the tension of the collarbones, saw memory in the crack of fingernails, heard regret in how someone held their breath. Then quietly, she'd ask them to grieve out loud in front of the plant. Often that's all it took. The plant would stand straighter or bloom or exhale pollen like golden dust. In her 20s, Ilia fell in love with a traveler who carved flutes from river bone. His name was Myro, and he had calluses on his lips from playing sad songs into high mountain air. They met when he passed through the valley and heard her humming to a dying fig tree. He stayed 3 seasons. They grew a garden together with twin paths and a moonlit well at the center. When he left, he said, "You're the garden I'll return to." She wept until the asters bloomed early. When Ilia turned 33, she left the valley, not because she was restless, but because the soil told her to. It spoke in dreams, a dying field, cracked earth, no bird song. So she walked, from region to region, barefoot and soft-spoken. She carried a bag of seeds, a vial of water, and one tiny flute Myro had left behind. In every place she paused, something grew. Even war camps, even plague towns, even borderlands without a name. She asked only one thing from every soul she met. Plant something with me, but only if you'll return to it. Years passed. One spring she arrived in a canyon carved like a wound. no birds, no wind, no growth. She dug her fingers in beneath the dust. Bones. She wept, but not for long. She removed her cloak, unbraided her hair, poured her water into the soil, and lay down, flat, face to the sky, hands open. It rained that night. The canyon flooded with scent. By morning, the dust had greened. From her chest, a sapling. From her fingertips, vines. And from her lips, a tiny flute sprouted. It played one note in the wind. The note was Myro's. They say her body became a tree that births healing fruit, that to eat it, you must first cry beneath it, and if you do, the tree will bloom blossoms of memories you thought you lost. The mirror of stone. Before there was speech, there was stillness, and before stillness, there was watching. This soul was carved into mountain before it was born into body. Let's get into it. They called him Ashen, named for the pale tone of his skin and the mineral light that shimmered from his eyes. He was born inside a monastic temple built directly into the cliffside. No midwives, only silence, stone, and snow. His mother, a silent acolyte named Maia, carried him for 9 months in solitude and fasting, believing him to be the reincarnation of a lost elder. The moment he emerged, lightning struck the cliff above the birthing cavern, an omen not of destruction, but of deep awakening. Ashen was not taught language. He was not raised in the way others are. He was embedded. The order of echoes believed in nonverbal transmission. Infants were raised to read movement, breath, tension, stillness. He was given no toys, no songs, no idle comforts. Instead, he learned by placing his hands in meditation bowls of water to feel the ripple of other initiates' breath. He observed meals eaten in total silence, where meaning was shared through nods, hand positions, and body posture alone. Ashen learned to decipher the tiniest shift, a foot curling, a jaw tightening, a shoulder dropping. He understood emotion before he understood thought. His earliest memories were of cold stone, incense trails, and warm glances passed like torches from one quiet soul to the next. By adolescence, Ashen had become something more than a boy, not yet monk, but already a vessel. He had not spoken a word in 14 years. Instead, he spent his days in the hall of reflection. It was a vast granite room lined with water mirrors, shallow pools carved into the floor, polished to obsidian stillness. Every initiate sat alone in one. The challenge: see yourself without becoming yourself. Ashen passed the trial in 3 days. Most took years. When the elders asked how, he wrote on parchment, "I did not look for me. I looked for what was still looking." What he saw in that mirror was not his face, but a field of still presence behind it, an awareness untouched by fear or form. In his young adulthood, Ashen became the mirror keeper. He tended to the sacred mirrors of the temple, not just the physical ones, but the people themselves. He had the gift of non-reflective presence. He did not distort what he witnessed. He moved with stillness so profound that grief unraveled in his presence. Villagers from miles around came to sit in silence with him. Some left weeping, others left with their posture changed, not from words, but from being seen. He had become a living mirror. One girl, only 7, clutched a knot of rage from losing her mother. Ashen held her hand and let the silence breathe. Her tears dissolved without pressure. Her first words after were, "I remember now." But then came the season of fire. A chain of volcanic eruptions buried several villages. Refugees came screaming to the cliffs. Ashen opened the temple. He broke centuries of isolation protocol. He housed the dying. He fed the broken. He listened to children scream in their sleep. He walked the halls day and night, absorbing grief in his silence. The mirrors dimmed. Some cracked under the weight of unspoken sorrow. For the first time, the mirrors were shattered, not by force, but by the grief they reflected. And Ashen began to change. He still did not speak, but his eyes burned. They shimmered with magma beneath the stillness. Late one night, during a snowstorm, he descended from the temple. He traveled down into the buried villages, walked barefoot across the heat-stained ash. He found the epicenter of the last blast. He knelt in the blackened soil, eyes open to the sky. He stood there for 6 days, still, bare-chested, motionless. During that time, crows gathered around him. Not one moved, not one cawed. On the 6th day, the sky cleared. He spoke. "I am here to hold what remains." The sky cracked. The earth sighed. And for the first time in memory, the air grew calm. The fires beneath the soil went quiet. He returned to the temple changed. He wore a cloak made of burned prayer flags. He carried no tools. But when he entered the hall of reflection, all the shattered mirrors reformed. No one saw them move, but by morning they were whole, and in their centers glowed faint spirals of light. People began calling him the stone mirror, not because he reflected nothing, but because he reflected only what was eternal. The air around him became so still that candles refused to flicker. Ashen aged. He chose a successor, a child named Yema, who laughed with her eyes and cried without shame. He placed her hand on a mirror and said, "You must never fix, only witness." These were the last words he ever said. He took her to the high garden above the temple where the cliffs meet the sun. He handed her a single stone, the first one he had ever seen his reflection in. He returned to the cliff's edge, sat in lotus posture, facing the sun, and turned to stone. They say his body is still there, but no birds land on him, no vines grow across him. He is not eroded, he is not claimed. He simply watches. And in the morning light, if you kneel just right before him, you can see your soul looking back. The vessel of flame. This time the birth was bright. Let's get into it. No shadows, no silence, no omen of loss, only sunlight piercing through the woven reed roofs, golden heat cascading over the laughing faces of the midwives. She was born in a circular dwelling beside a warm river, in the heart of a thriving village that danced to the rhythm of the seasons. Her mother was a fire tender, her father the village cartographer. She came into the world with fists open, eyes already tracking the flame of the hearth. She giggled when they placed her near it. They named her Kaylee, light that moves. She was not a lonely child. Her brothers fought over who got to carry her. Her aunts braided her hair into sun-ray spirals. Her people said she was born smiling. By 3, she was fire-touched. Her hands could light bark without flint, not as magic, as resonance. Her body held a frequency that flames recognized. By 6, she began dancing through fire rings during festivals. She could step into bonfires barefoot and emerge laughing. The fire loved her, played with her, bent around her body like a cloak. The village elders watched with awe, but not fear. They said, She is a vessel, not of destruction, of ignition. They did not isolate her. They celebrated her. She grew up surrounded by joy. Her adolescence was marked by movement. At 12, she began to see the spiral in her dreams, a symbol made of living fire, always unfolding, always returning. She painted it onto clay pots. She traced it into the dirt with her toes. She embroidered it into her shawls. She began leading dances under the moon. Her steps were not just graceful, they triggered light. Lanterns flickered awake when she spun. Campfires leapt higher. Children giggled and followed her movements like birds. She wasn't worshipped, she was included. She grew into her powers, surrounded by laughter, shared meals, and song. At 18, the river swelled. A once-in-a-century flood threatened the village. Panic bloomed like fire through dry grass. Kaylee stood at the water's edge. She did not pray, she sang. A single note rising from her belly like a phoenix. The waters slowed, the skies cleared. And when the people looked upon her, they saw not a girl, but a beacon. They built the spiral hall around her, a temple with open walls and a hearth that never went out. She did not become a priestess. She became a teacher. She lived long, loved often, bore children who carried sparks of their own. She partnered with dancers, with singers, with stone carvers who saw her not as divine, but familiar. She laughed often, sang always, cried when the old dog passed, kissed the wrinkled hands of friends who outlived their memories. And when her time came, it was in spring. She lay on a woven mat beside the hearth. Her last words were, "Keep dancing, even when the fire is small." And when she passed with a smile, the flame in the hearth leapt high once, as if bowing. To this day, every fire dance begins with a spiral drawn in dust, and the name Kaylee is whispered, not in mourning, but in gratitude. She was the life that burned with others, not alone. She was the flame that taught joy. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, follow, and like, and I'll catch you next time.